Hey everybody, this video is called Reflect the Journey, and tonight we're going to continue our pass through in the book of Deuteronomy, where we're going to look at Moses remembering the march to Canaan, and then also we're going to look at the appointment of Joshua. So chapter 3 verse 1 and 2, it says, "Then we turned and went up the road to Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, came out against us, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. And the Lord said to me, do not fear him, for I have delivered him and all his people and his land into your hand. You shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt at Heshbon." So Bashan was a fertile region located east of the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River that extended from Mount Hermon in the north to the Yarmuk River in the south. And Israel met King Og and his army in battle in verse 1, as we see, at Edrei, which was a city on the Yarmuk River. And God commanded Israel to attack Bashan as they passed through Og. In verse 3 through 11, "So the Lord our God also delivered into our hands Og, king of Bashan, with all his people, and we attacked him until he had no survivors remaining. And we took all his cities at that time. There was not a city which we did not take from them. 60 cities. All the region of Argob, the kingdom of Og and Bashan, all these cities were fortified with high walls and gates and bars, besides a great many rural towns." So we see that they had high walls there, and the Democrats do not approve this passage here. Verse 6, "And we utterly destroyed them, as we did to Sihon, king of Heshbon, utterly destroying the men, women, and children of every city. But all the livestock and the spoil of the cities we took as booty for ourselves. And at that time we took the land from the hand of the two kings of the Amorites, who were on this side of the Jordan, from the river Arnon to Mount Hermon. The Sidonians called Hermon Seroin, and the Amorites called it Senor. All the cities of the plain, all Jalad, all Bashan, as far as Sauka and Edrei, cities of the kingdom of Og and Bashan. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. Indeed, his bedstead was an iron bedstead. Is it not in Rabbah of the people of Ammon? 9 cubits is its length, and 4 cubits its width, according to the standard cubit." So we see that Israel here went on to defeat Bashan, which brought more territory to occupy on the east side of the Jordan River. And as a result of this, they could have the confidence that they could even defeat the mighty enemies on the west side of the Jordan. And Og was the last of the Rephaim in the area, and Og's bedstead was about 14 feet by 6 feet when you look at our modern measurements compared to the cubits and all that are given in the Bible here in the Old Testament. And the bedstead, you can pretty much think of it as a coffin. In verse 12 through 17, "In this land which we possessed at that time, from Oer, which is by the river Arnon, and half the mountains of Jalad, and its cities, I gave to the Reubenites and the Gadites. The rest of Jalad, and all Bashan, the kingdom of Og, I gave to half the tribe of Manasseh. All the region of Argob, with all Bashan, was called the land of the giants. Jair, the son of Manasseh, took all the region of Argob, as far as the border of the Geshurites and Machathites, and called Bashan after his own name, Havoth Jerah, to this day. Also I gave Jalad to Machir, and to the Reubenites and to the Gadites I gave from Jalad as far as the river Arnon, the middle of the river as the border, as the river Jabbok, the border of the people of Ammon, the plain also with the Jordan as the border, from Chinnereth as far as the east of the Sea of Arabah, the Salt Sea, below the scopes of Pisgah. So the 2.5 tribes decided that this land on the east side of the Jordan River was good enough for them, and the Lord allowed it if they would fulfill the obligations that are mentioned in the next set of verses to come in verse 18 through 20. And it says, "Then I commanded you at that time, saying, the Lord your God has given you this land to possess. All you men of valor shall cross over armed before your brethren, the children of Israel. But your wives, your little ones, and your livestock, I know that you have much livestock, shall stay in your cities, which I have given you, until the Lord has given rest to your brethren as to you, and they also possess the land which the Lord your God has given them beyond the Jordan. Then each of you may return to his possession, which I have given you." So this was the command here for the Transjordan tribes to assist the rest of Israel in the conquest of Canaan. In verse 21-22, "And I commanded Joshua at that time, saying, your eyes have seen all that the Lord your God has done to these 2 kings. So will the Lord do to all the kingdoms through which you pass. You must not fear them, for the Lord your God himself fights for you." So we see in these 2 verses that Moses is encouraging Joshua, as Joshua was given a big responsibility to bring the whole nation into a land where they weren't going to be welcomed openly. And this is where they would have to fight to possess what God had rightfully given to them. And Joshua was encouraged to remember what God had done to the 2 kings. And remembering God's past faithfulness is the key to present and future victory. And Moses encourages Joshua to not be afraid, because the Lord himself would provide the supernatural means, the power, and give them the victory. In verse 23-29, wrapping up the chapter here, "Then I pleaded with the Lord at that time, saying, O Lord God, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your mighty hand. For what God is there in heaven or on earth who can do anything like your works and your mighty deeds? I pray, let me cross over and see the good land beyond the Jordan, those pleasant mountains and Lebanon. But the Lord was angry with me on your account and would not listen to me. So the Lord said to me, enough of that. Speak no more to me of this matter. Go up to the top of Pisgah and lift your eyes toward the west, the north, the south, and the east. Behold it with your eyes, for you shall not cross over this Jordan. But command Joshua and encourage him and strengthen him, for he shall go over before this people, and he shall cause them to inherit the land which you will see. So we stayed in the valley opposite of Beth Peor. So with the victories over Sihon and Og, Moses made one final passionate plea to be allowed to enter the promised land here. However, we see that Moses would not get that privilege, that God would not grant him what he's asking for. And later on in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 48 through 52, and Deuteronomy chapter 34, verses 1 through 4, we see that God will allow Moses to go to the top of Pisgah and to be able to see the land. So Moses will be able to see the land from the distance, but he would not get the blessing to cross into the land. In Beth Peor, it was east of the Jordan River, opposite of Jericho. And if you go back to Numbers chapter 20, Moses' sin at Meribah is where he misrepresented God as being angry with Israel when God wasn't. And that's why he could not enter the promised land, because Moses went on and smashed the rocks without believing in faith of God providing the water for Israel. And some people might feel that Moses' punishment was excessively harsh after one sin. You know, that was like the big time that we know that Moses messed up. But he would have to die short of the promised land. And we see that Moses is judged by a stricter standard because of his position that God has put him in with the nation. And we see he's judged to a higher standard because of the unique relationship he has with God. And in the New Testament, we're going to talk about church leaders in the wrap-up, how they are held to a higher standard. And Moses was a man that was great in intercession prayer. And he's one of the greatest in the Bible. But yet, we see that even when Moses prayed, God told him no at this time. And unlike us, who may have a bad attitude if we were in Moses' shoes, if we were told that we weren't going to get to finish the mission because we messed up or we sinned, Moses, we see, he doesn't get, bitter or angry at God. He gets where he's like, all right, Joshua, it is. Now let me encourage him. Let me direct Joshua how to go about. And let me be an encouragement to Joshua. Let me seek a shepherd that would be successful in leading. And so to wrap up here, we see that God commands Israel to attack Bashan as Moses reflected the defeat of Bashan. And we looked at the division of the land that conquered the east side of the Jordan River among the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. And we look at the command for the Transjordan tribes to assist in the rest of Israel in the conquest of Canaan. And we see that Moses reflected the appointment of Joshua as he goes on to encourage Joshua to remember what God has done and what God is capable of doing, what God has promised to do. And Moses reflect his plea to enter the promised land as he asks God to relent of the punishment, as he intercedes for God to show him mercy. But we see that later on in Romans chapter 9, that God will show mercy to whom he shows mercy. And I believe we see that verse back in Exodus as well. So we saw that God said no to Moses in prayer, no matter what position Moses was in, no matter that Moses was one of the greatest in the Bible that had a greatest relationship in the Old Testament. And we must realize that sometimes God will say no to his mightiest people, intercessors, such as Moses. And then later on in the book of Jeremiah, you see that Jeremiah was also told no in Jeremiah 15 verse 1. And as a leader, God was holding Moses to a higher standard, as God does with all that he gives authority to work under him. And we're going to go to James chapter 3 verse 1. And it says here, "My brethren, let it not be many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment." So in the book of James here, James talks about church leaders like pastors and, deacons, all that. They're going to be held to a deeper judgment, because when God gives authority to someone, there's accountability. And Moses defaced the picture of Jesus' redemptive work through the rock which provided water in the wilderness. And I want to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10 to reflect that. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 4. It says, "And all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ." So Paul gave the picture here as Jesus as the water providing and the life-giving rock. In John chapter 7 verse 37, it says here, "On the last day, that great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink." So Jesus was struck once that provided life for all who would drink of him. In Hebrews chapter 10 verse 10, Hebrews 10:10 through 12. It says here, by that will we have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. And every priest stands ministering daily and offering repeatedly the same sacrifices which can never take away sins. But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins, forever sat down at the right hand of God. So Jesus only had to suffer once, and Moses should have only used words of faith when he went about to bring life-giving water to the nation of Israel. And that's going to wrap up this video. We'll see you next week as we're going to look at the call to obedience. And I hope that you have a great rest of your weekend. God bless.